there, my name is Jess and welcome to my channel Have a Book at This. Today I'm going to be telling you about the books that have made me cry. Now, just a little disclaimer, right? So I am not a book crier normally, okay? I mean, on the inside I can be like practically throwing my guts up into my hands because of how hard I'm crying on the inside, because of all the pain and the feels and the empathy and the sadness. But on the outside, I just look like this. It's not a reflection of how my soul feels when I'm reading books, okay? But for some reason, my emotions don't often manifest themselves in the form of tears. And these 7 books are the exception to that. So they are ranked in order from books that have made me cry the least to book that made me cry the most. So let's just get started with the book that made me cry the least of the ones. And that book is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. So I reread this after having to read part of it for school once, and I didn't expect myself to get as emotionally attached to the characters as I did. The book is told entirely from the perspective of death, so I honestly thought that because there wasn't a first-person narrative and because I wasn't directly linked to the characters, it wouldn't have much of an emotional impact on me. Oh my god, was I wrong. The sort of last 50 pages of this just made me cry so much. And for those of you who haven't read this book, what you don't know is that death spoils itself continuously throughout the book. It tells you what is going to happen at the end of the book, and you think that would ruin the surprise, but instead it just builds up the dread and anticipation of what's going to happen until it does happen, and you are left a sobbing mess on the floor. Unless you're me, in which case I only shed a few tears, but for me that's still a lot, and this book definitely impacted me emotionally. The next book that made me cry is Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. Now, I've got a feeling this would be on a lot of your lists, solely for that completely soul-destroying epilogue at the end. But it actually wasn't the epilogue that made me cry. Halfway through this book, and I don't think this is really a spoiler, right? Will and Magnus have a conversation about Will's parvati bond with Jem, and that point when they had that conversation was the point when the tears started coming, and they were sort of on and off for that last half a book. And I will admit that the epilogue completely broke my heart. This is such an emotional trilogy, and none of the books were quite as sad and as bittersweet and as lovely as this last one, so of course it was going to have me crying. The next book on my list is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. So I'm not sure if this one is cheating, because this is more of a reread cry, because the first time I read this book I was only 8, so I hadn't really realised the importance of Harry Potter in my life at that point. It wasn't until I reread this book about a couple of years ago, and I don't know what happened to me. I went from not shedding a tear at all into this book to having sort of a steady on and off stream of tears throughout it. I remember the first thing that really made me cry was Fred, and no, not Fred. I can't remember what twin it was. When one of the twins got his ear spelled off, that got me. The most random things were getting me, and I think it was because I had to say goodbye again to these characters that I'd grown up with, and I know that sounds cheesy, but I didn't really realise what an emotional impact Harry Potter had had on me until later, and I actually haven't picked up this book since then, because I just know that I will cry again and again because of the influence that J.K. Rowling has over my emotions. So in 4th place on my list of 7 is the book Eleanor Park by Rainbow Rowell. So this book is really emotional, and I think a lot of that comes down to the beauty of Rainbow Rowell's writing style. She made the most simple gestures seem amazing and romantic and beautiful. She made an awkward first kiss in an alleyway make me sort of do one of those watery, not sure whether you want to cry yet smiles, and the ending of this is famously bittersweet and famously beautiful, and I couldn't help but crying in the last few pages, because you cannot help with this book but feel the intensity of the the emotions that Eleanor and Park feel. They pierce you and they don't let you go and they make you blubber like a baby, and I loved every second of it, to be fair. And in third place is Jellicoe Road by Melina Marchetta, also published as On the Jellicoe Road. So Jellicoe Road has two intertwining storylines, and for a lot of the time you don't realise how these two storylines are going to connect. One is a story set in a present day Australian boarding school, and one is a story centering around a group of 5 teenage friends in the 1980s. For the longest time you don't realise how this is going to connect, but it's the beauty and the sadness of the way that they do that makes you cry. The bonds between the characters in these books are so strong, and whenever anything happens to any one of them, you feel the pain for them the same way that the characters felt the pain for them. Melina Marchetta has a gift with writing, she has a gift with character, she has a gift with words, and I felt so emotionally manipulated all throughout this, just because I could not stop myself from crying at certain parts. It was both beautiful and unbelievably sad, and I absolutely loved it. So in second place on my list is a book that I think a lot of you will have as your first place choice, and that is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I don't really know any one person who has not at least shed a tear whilst reading this. It's impossible not to. It's about 2 kids with cancer falling in love, okay? How can you not cry at that? I think a lot of my tears were probably due to the strength and the realisticness of Hazel's voice. I've heard a lot of criticisms on Hazel's character, saying that it's too pretentious and too un-teenage-like, but for all the criticisms, I genuinely believe that her voice is a really strong one, and it's one that I personally connected to, and I could not help but feel for Hazel throughout this entire book. I don't want to spoil this book for the few of you out there who have not read The Fault in Our Stars, but it is a part with Isaac towards the end that made me cry. And for those of you who have read the book, you'll probably know what that part with Isaac is. But from that point onwards, really, I couldn't help but cry. It was an ugly cry. My mum actually had to send me upstairs to finish reading this because I was frightening my dogs. That is how much this book made me cry. And in first place for the book that has made me cry the most tears ever is Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wine. I feel like not enough people know about this book, and more people should know about this book because it's an unbelievably well plotted historical fiction novel. It's set during World War II and it tells the story of 2 females. One is a special operatives agent, a spy, and the other is a pilot, and most of the book is told in the form of a confessional letter, as the spy has been kidnapped and is being held by the Nazis and has agreed to give up all she knows about the resistance in 2 weeks before they've told her that they'll kill her, essentially. This book is so powerful and so beautiful and so and the most painful thing about it is you don't see what's coming is coming. Elizabeth Wine has plotted such a tight series of events that it is impossible to tell what way it's going to turn until it does turn, and by the time it has turned, I was just inconsolable. I was crying, I had to put the book down, I had to get up, I had to walk around the house, I had to make myself a cup of tea. Even that didn't make it better, okay? When your problems can't be solved by a cup of tea, what else is there to do, really? Elizabeth Wine is just an absolute master writer. This book was beautiful, this book impacted me, and yes, I cried, but would I read it again? Yes, because it's an amazing story, and all of these books are amazing stories, and I think it's a true testament to the writers if they can make you cry, if they can make you feel the emotions of a character enough so that you cry. So with that conclusion, those were the 7 books that made me cry ever. What books made you cry? Would they make me cry? I don't know, so post them in the comments if you would please. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.